Under the Yaqui tribe, always staying close to water is very important, especially for survival. Today we're here to harvest our willow trees. We call it in our language wata. This is medicine, and so we believe this is going to bless our homes for the year, protect us from, life in general, things that we go through. And so when we get ready for this time, we'll go ahead and harvest the willow tree, and then we adorn them in front of our houses. We're not hurting the tree. We're mainly just taking trimmings down, and then that frees up the branches to grow, and then we get another batch. We're all here together working, our elders that are here as well, just to make sure this tradition keeps on going.
Tiny fragment of a maize cob.
Farmers first started coming in here maybe about 4,200 years ago. We have some of the earliest evidence of maize. And so through time, these farms grew in size, population gradually grew, and we have this just deep record of food production going up through the prehistoric period into the Spanish period, the Mexican period, the Euro-American period. This is one of the reasons why we are a UNESCO World City of Gastronomy, because of this deep and rich and continuous record of food production that you won't see anywhere else in the United States.
The Santa Cruz River has a really interesting history. We know that it was originally an intermittent stream that was fed by these springs. And so an intermittent stream means that it's running year-round in some locations, but not throughout the entire stream bed. And so we had the Santa Cruz River was mostly dry for most of the year, except for areas at the base of Tucson Hill, where you had natural springs that fed the river throughout the year. And then as you get further north from Tucson Hill, it would go back to the sort of ephemeral stage where it would only flow when there was precipitation or snowmelt.
Prior to the late 1800s, the Santa Cruz would have had a broad floodplain. There would be fields along the floodplain, but there would also be a lot of riparian vegetation like cottonwoods, willows, so that when there was a flood after a monsoon or after a winter storm, that vegetation would break the force of the floodwaters, force the waters to spread out across the floodplain and seep back into the groundwater aquifers.
One of the most important parts of all rivers in general is how they have supported human life for a very long time. And in the case of the Santa Cruz, well, we all know about the Tohono O'odham that have been here for centuries. They knew how to manage the river before colonization, and they were doing it in a sustainable way until the Spaniards came, and then they began using water as if it was an infinite resource.
The interesting part about the Santa Cruz is that even though it was heavily used as an agricultural river, it supported an amazing amount of wildlife. So in that small trickle of water that you would see there historically, you would have seen 6 species of native fish swimming in that water, a freshwater turtle, a number of frogs and toads, 150 to 200 different species of birds. It supported a robust ecosystem even though it was surrounded by agriculture for much of the last several thousand years. Essentially for several thousand years, the Atam and their Hohokam ancestors, folks had stewarded the river and the water resources, used that water sustainably in that agriculture, and all that wildlife, all those species we just talked about, were supported as well. Before the Colorado River water arrived, all the wells were low, all the aquifers were low, and we would have had to conserve so much water so fast in order to get the groundwater levels to rise that it would have probably taken 100 years or more to get to where we're at today.
When the 7 states along the Colorado divvied it up under the Colorado River Compact in 1922, they thought that the average flow in the Colorado was over 16 million acre-feet a year. That was based on 2 of the wettest decades on record. And so today, 40 million people in the Colorado River Basin depend in whole or in part on water from the Colorado River. That water was, on paper, over-allocated from the very beginning. The subdivisions behind us, the subdivisions and shopping centers to the east of us, all of that is a result of World War II. Cities that before had primarily depended upon agriculture, cotton farming, and tourism suddenly began to have manufacturing centers. So you've seen explosive urban, suburban, and exurban growth in Tucson, in Phoenix, in every western city.
Once the original Santa Cruz River dried up, our only source of water was pumping it from the ground. And that was the case for decades and decades and decades. The problem was we were using more water than was being replenished by rainfall and runoff in our washes during the rainy seasons.
And those aquifers began to lower, they began to fall 10 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet. And up until the 1990s, Tucson was the largest city in the United States totally dependent on groundwater.
The river basically became what most Tucsonans know it as today, which is a dry wash.
The Tucson region grew and pushed our people away, along with the Opata, Apache, O'odham. And so the Yaquis moved to this side of the Santa Cruz, which is now this Silver Bell area, which is known as Buyabualco. When we see these villages today, we're still near the river. However, the freeway, as you see behind us, is there as well. And so it really divided our communities, where you have a road now, and then you have fencing, and then you get to the river. We think about, oh, that back then was hard, but I think today it's even harder with all the outside movement, construction, dispersal of resources, and how are we gonna adapt in the next 20 years? We're doing our best to preserve, for the next generation, preserve our language, our culture, our history, our teachings, our ceremonies, and community life.
while trying to preserve as best we can the natural environment and resources.
If I were the dictator of Arizona, first of all, I would rigorously enforce the Groundwater Management Act, which stipulates that by 2025, recharge has to equal discharge. Secondly, I would put a moratorium on development. No more new homes. Instead of being vigilant along the southern border between Arizona and Sonora, we should build a wall and keep California out.
There's certainly solutions, and in terms of water usage, it's largely agriculture that is the biggest usage of water. And so part of the stress for me was driving down miles and miles of highway that has pecan orchards. Do we need pecans for survival? Why are we, I question a lot about how we're using our water and whether we're using our water responsibly.
Right now, culturally, it's like, yes, you should take a shower or a bath every single day, right? Do you really need that? Are there a lot of cultures that do that? We need to think about that and think about the cultural uses of water and where we might be able to minimize that. We can get there through efficiency of our shower heads and things like that, but to really get to the point where we're sustainable, when no Colorado River water is coming in, we're going to have to get more dramatic in reducing water. In 2019, the city of Tucson started putting some reclaimed or recycled water, some treated wastewater back into the river and restored flow there for the first time in 100 years since it had originally dried up. Now we've got surface water, which is great, but we don't have the shallow groundwater like we had historically.
There's a rattlesnake.
There's a rattlesnake?
Yeah.
Oh boy. It's on the transect line?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
It's angry. There is a damselfly, the neotropical bluet, that before the Santa Cruz River was flowing, it was only found in the Gila River in the United States. Now, after the Santa Cruz is now flowing, we can also find that species there. So it's bringing back species that were probably here before the Santa Cruz dried. But now, when the Santa Cruz dried, they had to leave, and now they're coming back. So we're seriously recovering the river.
If you were to go back 130 years, everybody in Tucson would have thought the Santa Cruz River is supposed to have water. After it dried up, then we had 3 or 4 generations of Tucsonans who thought the river is supposed to be dry, because that's the only thing they saw was a dry river. So now that there is water back in parts of the river, we need to show more people and educate people about that and show why it's a good thing. And then we'll have generations of Tucsonans that think water is supposed to be in the river, like it was for thousands of years. And they will support the city and the county policies and politicians that want to keep that water in the river and keep that ecosystem going.
I think there is an opportunity to bring the ideas that Tucson has actually done successfully to Sonora, and not only use it as an example, but also try to work together in the sense that we share the same desert. And if we could bring together these strategies to preserve water, I think we could improve the whole ecosystem, not just each one of those cities.